Major support for Carolina Business Review is provided by Grant Thornton. Operating in more than 100 countries, our tax, audit, and advisory professionals specialize in helping companies unlock their growth potential. Colonial Life, providing benefits to employees to help them protect their family, their finances, and their futures. And Sunoco, a global manufacturer of consumer and industrial packaging products and provider of packaging services with more than 300 operations in 35 countries.
By nature, it's not a stretch for us to be more optimistic and upbeat in the spring. That's an easy one, and especially the blue skies and the sunshine of our very unique Carolinas spring are even better as we approach Easter. I'm Chris William, and welcome again to the most widely watched source of Carolina business, policy, and public affairs, continuously seen each week on PBS for 28 years. Thank you for supporting this dialogue. Speaking of upbeat, two of our more stimulating and forward-leaning industries represent here today, engineering and life sciences. Sepi Saidi and Sam Konduros will join us. And later on, the Palmetto State's CFO, Treasurer Curtis Loftis.
Gratefully acknowledging support by Blue Cross Blue Shield of South Carolina, an independent licensee of the Blue Cross and Blue Shield Association. Visit us at southcarolinablues.com. Barings, a leading global asset management firm dedicated to meeting the evolving investment and capital needs of its clients. Learn more at barings.com. On this edition of Carolina Business Review, Sepi Saidi of Sepi Engineering and Construction, Sam Konduros from SCBIO, and special guest Curtis Loftis, South Carolina Treasurer.
Hello, welcome again to our program. I don't think it's too early to say Happy Easter, so happy holidays and Easter.
Thank you.
Welcome back. Good to have you. Sepi, good to see you. Let's start with, I want to quote something to you, so forgive me for reading, but there was a recent report from the John Belk Foundation, John Belk Endowment, and a group called Carolina Demography, and it's called North Carolina's Leaky Educational Pipeline and Pathways to 60% Post-Secondary Attainment. Not the easiest title. But the point is 2/3 of all jobs in our state next year, in North Carolina next year, will require some type of education and training beyond just high school. Currently, only about 47% of the 5.3 million working adults in North Carolina have any kind of post-secondary degree or non-degree credential. Does this, Sepi, you see this in your industry, I'm sure it's very technical. Is there a huge gap that is very concerning to find people that are qualified?
First, thank you for having me. It's always wonderful to be here. And to answer your question, yes. There is a real gap, a skills gap, and finding talent is becoming a major issue that we are proactively following all the time. As my role I am involved in the North Carolina Chamber of Commerce. I'm a second vice chair, and there's an active program that's called Talent Management Pipeline, TMP, that is dealing with this same issue because all of the industries have the same concern.
Sam, same question. How critical is this?
Nothing's more critical, actually. We did the state's first ever strategic plan for how to build, advance, grow the life science industry this past year that was on the heels of a study that gratefully verified that we have almost 500 life science companies in the state, 42,000 employees, and it has an $11.4 billion impact on South Carolina's economy. Now the fastest growing sector of our knowledge economy. However, by far number one critical issue, if we're going to continue that trajectory, is workforce and talent. I think when you're hovering between 3% and 4% unemployment and what is a relatively tight labor market anyway, and we're a victim of our success even to some extent. We have a major new company in Charleston, for example, that relocated from Idaho, and while they're trying to recruit 600 life science employees right next to Boeing, Mercedes, Volvo at the same time, you know, it sort of accentuates this issue.
You know, you think this leans into, so in South Carolina there's a short session in the General Assembly. It goes on through May 9th. In North Carolina, there's a very long session that will go on a good part of the year. Do you think these type of statistical information, does it help the debate around the General Assemblies leaning into education funding?
Absolutely, and the exciting thing, I'll say this, I have the privilege of sitting on our State Chamber's Executive Committee as well. Both SCBIO's #1 strategic issue is workforce and talent, as is the State Chambers. And right now our legislature is contemplating the most sweeping education reform and innovative legislation around that in decades.
Do you think education will get the same kind of nod in North Carolina in this session, Sepi?
I think so. It's a really important topic. All the legislators are probably constantly hearing from business community about the need for talent, and it's a very important issue, and I hope that we invest significantly in education and in teachers' pay.
Does this handicap, and we'll take your business, Sepi Engineering.
Yes.
Does this type of challenge in finding talent, does it handicap your business from being more effective?
I think in the long term it will. So in the short term, we are training and developing our own staff, and we're reaching out to other segments, bringing folks into engineering, construction, environmental. So it's expanding, but we can't keep doing that if we don't have anybody to backfill this. So I would say in the next 5 to 7 years, it's really going to show a significant impact. That's why it's important to invest in it now.
Let's shift to transportation for just a second.
Okay.
Sam, how critical is it for South Carolina? I know Christy Hall, Secretary of Transportation, is doing all she can to deploy all this new money coming in. But how critical is transportation to get that right when you're either in the upstate, as you are, in the low country, or somewhere in between like the Midlands? How critical is that?
Well, it's crucial. I mean, I think 20, 30 years ago, South Carolina, one of the feathers in our cap was the quality of our interstate system for a population of around 3 million at that time, and now we've surged past 5 million. I think we did not give the attention that was needed or flow the funds that were needed into maintaining the infrastructure. So gratefully, and a very important roads infrastructure bill was passed that you referenced, and you know, at one point last year, Greenville was the 4th fastest growing city in America. Charleston is exploding with growth. Columbia, we are experiencing real traffic, and so for our industry, when you look at over 60% of everything produced in the upstate is flowing through the port of Charleston, for instance, and what it takes to move goods and services, the inland ports that are in the upstate and in the PD regions now. So I would say, for the business community, that was probably the #1 issue until we finally passed a bill to begin addressing it.
In North Carolina, Sepi, you spent over a decade in North Carolina DOT. You were an engineer.
Yes.
You kind of know the DNA of these things. So, and let's kind of tease out just what's going on in the Triangle. So the Triangle trying to find its way forward with a light rail system that connects Raleigh, Durham, Chapel Hill, RTP, et cetera, et cetera. How not just how critical is this, but where do you feel like all the players, Orange County, Wake County, do you feel like everyone's on the same page when it comes to some salient transportation plan?
I think everybody is on the same page with regards to the transportation plan as a whole. But if you dissect it into light rail or bus rapid transit or different modes, that's where they are not all on the same page. And specifically, we had the Durham Orange Light Rail that it was in the news where there were some concerns from Duke University regarding the electromagnetic field impacts on the operations centers, so forth. So that has become a major, it is going to be a major obstacle, and we really need to solve that. We need to get all the stakeholders on the same page, have a conversation around how can we mitigate this. There has to be a way that we can get around it. But it is extremely crucial for us to look at all modes of transportation.
You know, and I don't mean this is a pun, but not to throw Duke University under the bus on this, but you're an engineer. Does that electromagnetic challenge around patients, is that a real issue?
You know, I'm not a specialist in that area, so I really can't comment on it, but I have followed some news and media where I know there are folks who specialize on this, and they feel strongly that there are ways to mitigate that.
Yeah. We got about a minute left, Sam, and this is a loaded question, and it could take 30 minutes to answer, but I'm going to ask you to do it in about a minute. Richard Florida, the famous author, futurist, somebody that looks around the corner, said that America is losing its edge in startups. A lot of the venture capital now is going offshore, no longer going to high-cost places like Silicon Valley, et cetera, but not just, it's being patriated outside the country.
Right.
Is that a concern in the bio and the life sciences business?
It will always be a concern, I think, but I see a huge opportunity with the Carolinas, and it's an amazing region of the world now, really, and
Absolutely.
people want to live there. The quality of life is attracting the creative class like never before. The 20 to 29-year-olds, they want to live in Raleigh, Charlotte, Greenville, Charleston, cities like this, and that's helping a lot. You combine that with a reasonable cost of living, mountains, beaches. So I think we have no trouble recruiting talent. We just want to create more opportunities to bring them here. I think the other thing is we finally in South Carolina have an ecosystem for life sciences that simply didn't exist. We were not equipped even 10 years ago to fund, nurture, grow our best and brightest young companies. So we were way too good at exporting our talent. I think that has changed now, and we have VCs from the West Coast and the Boston areas, rather than sweeping our talent away, say, we like you right where you are.
So you're encouraged.
I am.
And we have education system in North and South Carolina, our universities that are incredible.
That's
Do you
right.
think that's a particular leg up or leverage?
I think it's a huge leg up.
Agreed.
A really strong education and not having that traffic problem yet. And the beautiful scenery. So I think we can really invest a great deal and attract venture capital to our states.
Let's bring our guest in, has a particular opinion about a lot of these things. So thank you. Please stay with us. Coming up on our program, he's been here before. His name is Mike Reardon. Head of what used to be called the Greenville Health System. Now it's called Prisma, and it is a consolidation of not just Greenville Health, but Palmetto Health out of the Midlands. Mike will be our guest on the program. And also John McConnell from McConnell Golf. Here is a concept of rolling up golf courses. He has been doing it successfully for many years. He will be our guest on this program. At first pass, these concepts sounds much more institutional than sexy. Things like unfunded liability and pensions, health care, credit worthiness, unclaimed property, college savings. However, our special guest has embraced these ideas and others with a passion that might make you think that they are exciting. In his 9th year now as treasurer of the state of South Carolina, we welcome back Curtis Loftis. Your Honor, welcome.
It's very nice to see you.
I'm not going to ask you about the passion or the excitement around those what can seem mundane issues, Your Honor, but let's start with this idea of China and U.S. trade. We've all been watching it, the uncertainty, the back and the forth. How much has it really impacted the treasures of South Carolina?
I don't think it's had much of an impact yet, but of course we worry about it dragging on. My sources tell me that the behind-the-scenes negotiations are doing well. Both North and South Carolina are lucky that we're less dependent on European trade than we are on the Far East. So that makes us stand out. It also puts us at more peril now. But I think it's going to work out well. It's like everything else. We've got to take a risk. We've got to have to pay a price. But in the end, it will do very well for us.
What's your biggest concern right now? What do you look at and say, if we can fix that one thing, we will have been successful this year?
I think in South Carolina we have the same problem that a lot of states have, especially in the South, where we have an all-powerful General Assembly, and that's part-time legislators trying to govern a huge modern state. You know, North Carolina is a huge state. South Carolina has about a $30 billion budget. When you're trying to do that from a part-time basis, it's hard, and we've got to have more. I think voluntary, because on the way around that is if you change the Constitution, that's a long haul. We've got to have voluntary release of some of these controls. You got to say, hey, Mr. Treasurer, this is a big responsibility, whatever that task is. We're going to let you do it, and we're going to give you some oversight. But they've got to turn more loose. We see it in infrastructure. We see it in the way we borrow money. We see it in our education systems. We just have to have more professionals on the scene and people who can be held accountable.
Sepi, question?
Well, treasurers, good to be with you. My question is, how does the Treasurer's Office look at possibly utilizing the South Carolina pension fund into transportation? It's something that I'm constantly thinking about alternative methods of funding transportation. So I was wondering, do you have a perspective on that?
Our Retirement System Investment Commission has about $32 billion. They love the asset class of infrastructure. You know, it's not simple like it used to be. You don't buy and hold it. You can hop in, you can hop out. There are all these closed and open-ended funds. So they're trying to get their hands around it. There's been conversation about what can they do specifically in South Carolina.
Yes.
And we can invest in South Carolina. So there's a lot of conversation. With the Santee Cooper issue, there was even talk about what do you do with that? Could it go to the Investment Commission?
Yeah.
So there's a lot of talk at very high levels, and I'm kind of excited about it. I think it'll work out well.
Yeah, that sounds great.
Yeah, Sam?
Yes, sir. So first, Treasurer Loftis, thank you for really great service that you've been providing. We've been blessed to have really strong leaders in South Carolina, very integrated and collaborative in our strategies, and I think that's benefiting us. From an economic development standpoint, as we're striving to really build a high-impact knowledge economy in the state and connect talent and innovation with our companies and with industry, do you see innovative, creative ways that we can better fund, support our research universities and bring them even deeper into that process?
I think so. You know, there is a class of bonds that the Treasurer issues upon instructions from the General Assembly, research university bonds, and I think it's roughly $250 million. They're about a quarter of the way through that, so there's money there. Also, MUSC is expanding. You know, when you had the Richmond, the Prisma merger, I forget all these hospitals' names. They have so many of them bouncing around.
Palmetto and GHS.
But you know, MUSC's buying hospitals, and it's going to build some all through the PD. So not only is it an area where people need health care, but it's an area where they can do a lot of research.
Right.
And so the federal grants follow, the companies will follow. It's much like with Boeing. You put a Boeing there, and after a certain amount of time, you look around and you've got all Boeing's partners. And it's the same with the expansion of the university.
Yeah, you said something about Santee Cooper, and it's no surprise that Pacolet Milliken would like to acquire the assets of Santee Cooper. We also know that Duke, by Henry McMaster, has been asked to make a bid on that. What's the best outcome for that state asset for the residents of South Carolina?
Well, it's hard to know now because there's been a change in target. When at first you had the whole SCANA debacle, the 2 nuclear power plants, and we've all lived through that, so don't need to recount it. There was a set of options available, but now as certain pieces get taken away, you know, now Dominion owns SCANA, so it's a little harder to know. The General Assembly has authorized the company to do a lot of specific work about should we sell it, should we not sell it. Santee Cooper has its own ideas about whether it should be sold or not. And of course, then you have all the co-ops. So it is a situation that has a whole lot of voters involved. And you know what voters does when politicians and voters get together. There's one group is more afraid of the other.
Any idea, sorry to interrupt you, but any idea how this thing ends?
I think that for now, Santee Cooper will simmer. They have some new management down there. And I think that what's going to happen is they're going to make themselves a whole lot more efficient. And if they can, in this window of a year or two, if they can make themselves more efficient and show it, then I think that they got a chance of surviving in more or less the same form. They have a lot of debt, so that makes it difficult for them to be purchased. But it's needed. You know, we've got to have more economical power. Santee Cooper's rates at present are much higher than most people realize. And that affects, you know, we've got the big Google farm down there, which is massive. Google pays as much for their electricity in rural South Carolina as it does anywhere in the world. That's a sobering fact. Yeah. And then they sit right next door to the second biggest or third biggest user of electricity, the big aluminum factory. And when those guys say our prices are too high, we can't compete, then you know you got to follow on.
Something will change. Yeah. Sepi, question.
I was wondering how is the state of de novo banks in South Carolina. I serve on the Banking Commission in North Carolina, and we are seeing some new applications. What do you see in South Carolina?
Well, I'm the chairman of the Banking Commission, and we have one up and running, the first one in the country, down in Charleston. A bunch of those retired generals and admirals and businessmen. I don't know who's got the highest rank. I'm not sure they do either. But they've been on the ground now for over a year, and they're doing very well. Keep a close eye on them, and I think they keep a close eye on me. But these are fellows who see these niche markets, and they say, we live in Charleston. Charleston's bringing 67 people a day, I think, and they're not walking in. These are folks who come in with assets, and they're ready to do business. We have opened the first trust company in South Carolina in many years at Sullivan's Islands, of all places. Has another one, wants to come in down there. So it's recognized as a place where there's a lot of wealth. And of course in Charleston, many folks don't realize this, but there's a thriving money community there. There are hedge fund folks down there, there are private equity guys. They're under the radar, but they're operating, and that's important. And they're bringing with them all that capital.
I'm sure you like that.
I love it.
Very good.
Sam?
Sure. I was encouraged in our earlier conversation, Treasurer Loftis, that both of us work and collaborate with our counterparts in North Carolina, Georgia, other states. I think being able to share best practices, ideas is terrific. It's benefited me a lot. You're a creative guy, and I think you're driving innovation in our Department of Treasury. Do you look around the country and in kind of benchmarking with other states and what they're doing that is working? Are there new ideas you're trying to inject into our way of conducting business in South Carolina?
Yeah, we spend a lot of time on that, and it's it's fun when you make a game of these things. Sometimes they are boring. But the state treasurer manages about $45 billion a year. We custody it, invest it, and bank it. North Carolina's a much larger operation, and when Dale Falwell was elected, I'd get these calls at 9 o'clock, and he'd say at night, hey, what do you think about this private equities funds and their fees? What do you think? And I said, it's 9 o'clock. But, so we work together, the two of us work together, but we do a lot of benchmarking across the country. We changed the way Wells Fargo trained state banks, because
Don't point at me.
Yeah, no, it was a good thing, because we said we want to be better. You're going to have to be. We don't want to be one of the other 50. We want to set the standard, and we made them. I shouldn't say made. By our requirements, they had to change the way they were giving us instructions on how they are a big partner of ours. They're our biggest partner. So Wells had to redo their system for us, and that's good. And I can't wait till they come back and complain again, say we're going to have to do it again. It's our job to really look after the people of South Carolina. We're not a rich place. It's not the bank's position to do that. We know why banks are in money. They do a great job. We've selected Wells Fargo as our biggest partner for a reason. But when we are challenging them at all points, and we're telling them we want less fees in this, but we'll pay you more fees than that, we're doing it because we have a reason. We know how to serve our folks. We know how to move the money around the system in a swift and secure way so that people don't have to worry about their money or their personal information leaking out into the atmosphere. And that's really key. So
since you mentioned Wells Fargo a couple times, it's appropriate for me to say that I have fully disclosed I'm an employee of Wells Fargo and have been for 28 years. Let's go back to something. You said South Carolina is not a big state, but yet the pension liability, unfunded pension liability, about $25 billion or so. You're going to know that number better than I. Does that keep you up at night?
It does, and it's not that the figure's laying out there on the books. It's that the General Assembly had to appropriate through the county and the municipal and the state level an extra $750 million a year. That's every year, and that doesn't make the system much better. That stabilizes it. If you think about the waste of that, $750 million, it builds a lot of infrastructure. It builds a lot of schools. It will be a great assistance in rural education and rural health care. There's so many things you can do with that money. But because we didn't manage the system well for about 15 years, we now have this unfunded liability. Now, we fought like cats and dogs, and I still have the scars to prove it, but the reforms put in place since about 2012 and 13 are about $6.2 billion was the last time that was figured up. They're doing better. We were paying the highest in fees in the country. At the same time, we were getting the lowest in returns. That's not true anymore. Fees are down, returns are up, and so I'm encouraged. We've got good management over there, great staff, and if they get just a little bit of luck in the market, I think they'll pull it out. So
do you, given the length and the age of this market expansion, 10 years now, longest bull market in history, and we've got about a minute left, Your Honor, is there a way for you to model or plan that if there is a slowdown, that we'll still be okay on our plan.
They have. They've taken that into effect, and they've exercised their ability to travel completely through the private markets, not just in the high top line things, but all through the private markets to make sure that when the downturn comes, that they're going to be protected. They believe that their pools of liquidity are going to be adequate for them to withstand the downturns and maintain a rate of return that's it might not make what they need, but it'll be close to it, and that's what we need in the bad times.
Okay, Treasurer Loftis, thank you. It's been too long. Thanks for making it
Nice
back to the program. Good to see you. Sam, nice to see you. I mean, probably over a decade, but you're always welcome on our program.
Great to be here again.
And Sepi, congratulations, Triangle Journal Businesswoman of the Year. That's no small attainment. Congratulations, you deserve it.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Business Person of the Year. Sorry.
Thank you.
Stand corrected. Nice to see you all.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for joining us. If you have any questions or comments, we hope you will go to carolinabusinessreview.org. Until next week, I'm Chris William. Hope your weekend is good. Good night.
Major funding for Carolina Business Review was provided by Barings, Grant Thornton, Colonial Life, Sunoco, Blue Cross Blue Shield of South Carolina, and by viewers like you. Thank you. Promotional consideration provided by Business North Carolina Magazine. For more information, visit carolinabusinessreview.org.